adaptability needed to maximize.
Head of Worcester Business School, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, principal lecturer in leadership, and he flew all the way from the UK, and we're so happy that he managed to join us. So please welcome Professor Scott with me.
Thank you. Good morning. Or is it Sabah Akhir? So good morning. Thank you. So I'm Scott Andrews, and I'm from the University of Worcester. Can you all say Worcester? That's not too bad. The Americans really struggle with this. All right, there's a great video about this. And just as we were about to start, NG said to me, how do I say this? Is it Worcester? So it's the first thing that people normally say to me is, how do you say that? And then the second thing that people ask me is, where's that? So we are south of Birmingham. We are north of Bristol, and we have very little to shout about, but we are very famous for Worcestershire sauce, which is a global brand. And so as a thank you to NG for all the incredible work that she's done, okay, that's great. Now it's my privilege to greet you, and I do bring blessings from my university to you. It's a real privilege to be a part of this gathering. And I just want to, as we introduce the theme of working with AI and case writing, which is an incredibly challenging theme. I'm going to try and keep to time as best as I can. I reflect, first of all, on some of the comments that were made yesterday, because I think it's important to take some of these comments on board. So Dean Sharif Kamil said, we don't just need faculty to know how to write case studies, we also need faculty to know how to teach them. So if we're going to start with that in mind, we need to think, how are we engaging with AI in the classroom? How is AI going to enhance our teaching as well as our case writing? Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on that today, but you can't decouple this. If you're going to look at case writing, you have to look at case writing through the lens of case teaching. Michael said the world is changing so quickly, and in no other area more so than in AI and in enhanced AI connectivity and the number of different resources and apps. And I'm absolutely convinced that if anybody is recording this, then my disclaimer is it's out of date before I've finished, okay? Because things are changing so very quickly. We heard a quote from good old Michael Porter, who talked about case writing as being something that needs to be carefully crafted. Now, in our world of getting things done in 90 seconds, there needs to be the space for carefully crafted case writing. He went on to say people need to spend time. We need to spend some time with the case writing process. So let's hold that thought. And then I had somebody on my table who asked the question, well, can I use Quillbot? Can we use paraphrasing tools? What are we allowed to use? So these are questions and challenges that we need to explore today. Just by means of introduction, and checking my clicker works. When I'm not the dean of the university's business school, I'm a case scholar. And today I speak to you not as a dean, but as a case scholar. I've been working with the case method for 30 or more years now. And for many of those years, for more than 25 years, I've been working very closely with the team at the back from the Case Center. And we've worked very closely on developing resources to expand awareness and understanding and opportunity for case writing and for case teaching. So I've had the privilege of being able to travel around the world with the Case Center and with other partners, encouraging scholars and academics to think more carefully about how we embrace the case method to make it a meaningful tool that we can bring into the classroom to encourage what I refer to as participant-centered learning, putting the student at the heart of the learning process. I also about, let's go back in time. We heard yesterday that the case method formed out of Harvard Business School in 1921. The first case book was published. And to celebrate that, 100 years later, Routledge said to me, would you write a new case book? I'm pretty sure it wasn't because it was celebrating Harvard's 100th year, but 100 years later, in 2021, I produced a case study companion where I tried to track what people from, not just from the US, but from around the world have been saying and engaging with the case method as writers, as tutors, as explorers of the case method in different contexts, different cultures, different practices, different mindsets, different educational systems, and adapting that methodology to work in their own context. More recently, I've spent a lot of time in Turkey, not too far away from here, with friends at Istanbul and in Ankara at the METU, the Middle Eastern Technical University, looking at how to develop the case method as good practice across the Turkish academic community. And I've made probably about 20 different trips to Turkey to explore this. So the case method is being expanded, it's being adapted, it's changing. It's a wonderful organism that's changing around the world, and it's been a privilege to be part of that. Another little thing I'm doing, and this is an opportunity, and forgive me, just a quick plug, but Edward Elgar Publishers have invited myself and one of my colleagues, Professor Robin Bell, to edit a new case book. They've been running a number of case books in entrepreneurship, which they've been publishing over the past few years, and we are currently developing a case book in entrepreneurship and AI. So this is slightly off at a tangent from what we're going to look at today, but for those of you who are case writers and you're engaging in that entrepreneurship space and you're working with organizations who are engaging with AI to enhance their business activities, then if you're interested, get your phones out quickly, take that QR code, or come and grab me at the end. We've more or less at the end of our call for this, we've had lots of expressions of interest already, but I've discussed this. We've extended the call just for this conference. So I'm closing the call after this conference, but if you're interested, all the phones are going up now. That's what I wanted to see. So do feel free to have a word with me afterwards or take the QR code and you'll find more details about. You might want to suggest, you only have to put a quick abstract together at this stage, a proposal, an idea, if you'd like to contribute your case study to that book or a case study that you want to develop. There's plenty of time to do that. Okay. And then let's move more into this space of AI then, because in September of this last year, I was invited by the Case Centre to work collaboratively with them to present a professional development workshop at the British Academy of Management. The title was going to be Using AI in Your Case Classes. As part of that workshop, we put a paper together, and again, you can scan that QR code if you want to, because that paper forms the basis from which I'm presenting to you today. There are also paper copies of that paper, which Vicky has at the back, which are available to take afterwards. But here's my disclaimer. This was in September. It's out of date. It's totally out of date. But in it, we don't just look at case writing. We look at how AI is being engaged in the classroom for case teaching, how opportunities where students are now working with chatbots to have in-case class tutors, AI tutors in the classroom with them. We look at the ethics of engaging with AI, putting an ethical framework together, and we get some feedback on some recent research coming out of the States, what students are saying to us about how we should be engaging with AI. So how are we engaging with AI? Stunned silence. Let's find out, shall we? If you want to have a look at this, in fact, I'm going to give you this next. If you want to click on here with your phone, see if you can all have a go at this. We'll have a quick survey. I'm really hoping this technology works. If it doesn't, we'll put our hands up instead. But click on here if you can. Hopefully, it will take you to a little voting poll. And when you get there, it should just say KCC at the moment. So give me a nod. I'm seeing a few knowing nods around the room, so that's good. Doesn't matter if you can't all get it or if the internet's not working. You can put your hand up instead, and that's fine as well. So we'll just give this a moment for you all to try and get this on your phones. I'm seeing an array of different facial expressions here from, yep, I got it, from, I have no idea what to do now. What do I do with my phone? You could go to vvox.app and you could enter that code if you want to, but I'm going to switch slides in a second, so you better be quick. So how many of you are through? Yep, quite a few of you are through. All right then, let's go then. Let's see. Hopefully the poll is now open. Yes? The poll's open, so you can put. So how have you been engaging with AI for case teaching or writing? So you just click whichever button you prefer. Not at all, only a bit. Used it a lot. I'm an expert. This is me. If everybody at the bottom here says I'm an expert, that's my keynote session finished. So let's just see how we get on here. Okay, are we ready? Okay, we've all had a go at that. Let's see where we are. I really hope this technology is going to work now. So we're prepared. Oh, here we go. Look at this. I love this technology when it works. Okay, so, 28% of you in the room say not at all. God bless you. This is where I was just a few months ago. So you're in good company. Don't worry. 40% of you are being honest and saying, oh, only a little bit, and that's absolutely fine. 20% are using it. 12% of you are using it a lot. I'd love to meet with you at the end, and you can tell me how you're using it, and that would be really helpful. I am going to allow space for questions and answers at the end. Okay, so let's move on. Next question for you. This is a Likert scale, so this is a 1 to 5. Is this coming on your phone? Yep, are we getting this next one? So don't worry if you can't get it, if it's not working, don't panic. We're just going to get a quick sense check here of how, for those of you that can use the technology, how you're engaging and how helpful you think AI is going to be for the case method. So AI can help me a lot to improve my teaching. To what degree do we agree with that or disagree with that? AI will help my students to improve their learning from the case method. So on the left-hand side, it's strongly disagree, and on the right-hand side, you strongly agree. AI will be detrimental to my students' learning from the case method, detrimental. And then finally, AI will help me to become a better case author. That's an interesting one. For better, for worse, for richer, for poorer. Okay, are we all good? We've had a go at that? Okay, let's see where we're at with that then. So let's see, hopefully we're preparing some results here. Oh, there we go. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? So AI can help me a lot. The majority, we're in a 3.31 average scale there. So, we're quite confident that AI has a role to play in our teaching. AI will help my students, a bit more in the middle ground. So we've probably got some more thinking to be doing in that space. AI will be detrimental. Isn't that interesting? Almost exactly the same number here as, I don't think my clicker's not work. So we've got 2.9 and we've got 2.84 here. So some of us are clearly quite concerned about what the detrimental impact might be for our students. AI will help me to become a better case author. We're pushing up into almost 3.5 as an average there. So that gives us a view of the room, which is interesting. It suggests to me that we're there, we're aware, we're embracing, but we've probably got more to consider along the way, and we've got concerns, and perhaps quite rightly so. Thank you. Thank you for participating in that. Okay, so I'll come back to this in a minute. Let me just give you a quick sort of précis of my last month, okay? Because this perhaps sets a context. On Wednesday, I was just getting ready to travel out here. Thursday was going to be my last day at home, and so on Wednesday, I was working, I was preparing for this session. I was in my study. It was getting towards just after tea time, and my near 5-year-old girl was looking for Daddy. Why isn't Daddy around right now? This is my time. And so she found me in the study, and she said, "Come on, Daddy, what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I've got to go to Egypt." And she knows that we had a chat about this. And I said, "Come and sit on my knee." And so she sat on my knee in front of my computer, and I typed into the computer, "Please create a bedtime story for Martha, who is nearly 5 years old. The story should be no more than 400 words long and should be about..." And I turned to my daughter. What are we going to do? Well, she said, about a camel who has lost a hump. That's what you get from a 4 3/4-year-old girl these days. I said, okay. So I typed in about a camel who has lost a hump. I said, any other characters in this story? She said, I want a rabbit called Lima. Okay, so the story should include a rabbit called Lima. I said, and I want a zebra called Loveheart. I said, okay, and a zebra called Loveheart. And I punched that in. I thought, well, we're giving ChatGPT a run for its money today. And then I was just about to press send, and she said, oh, hold on, Daddy, we need an elephant and a penguin as well. And I'm thinking, my goodness, we really are pushing ChatGPT today. So I went back and I said, in 600 words. I crossed 400 out and made it 600 to give it a chance. And then I added, it should also include an elephant and a penguin. Oh, and then I said, and it needs to make Martha laugh. Send. Here is the camel who lost his hump. 5 minutes later, I'm in the middle of our lounge. We're sharing the story, and my little girl, Martha, is laughing. And I said to her afterwards, on a rating scale of 1 to 10, darling? She said, 10, Daddy, 10, Daddy. My wife looked and went, 4.5, maybe. She laughed. She laughed. Interesting. What are we doing with this technology? In the last month, I've been speaking, I spend a lot of my time externally facing with the business community in my role. I work with the Chamber of Commerce. I'm the Vice President of the local Chamber of Commerce, and I work with business leaders. I was speaking to a wealth management organization, and they said to me, we're going to make 2 of our staff redundant in the next 18 months because AI has taken their jobs and we don't need them anymore. I was speaking to one of the partners of the largest recruitment firm in my city who said, we have invested significantly in AI across all the different business functions of our organization, and we have managed to release about 20% of time from our staff, from more of the lower level mundane work that they were doing. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is a big redundancy call coming up now. But no, he said to me, what we've now done is we've gone to all of our staff and we've told them, we've gifted you 20% of your time. We want you to write a personal development plan to show us what you're going to do with that extra 20% of your time that you can use to make a difference for our business, given the objectives and the mission and values that we have. I then convened a trustees meeting. I'm a trustee of a local charitable trust, and it was my turn to take the minutes. And it was a Zoom call, and I noticed, have you noticed this on Zoom? There's an AI function now. And so it was my turn to take the minutes, and I'm just two fingers, you know, and I said to my trustees, do you mind, I will take the minutes, but do you mind if I press this button that says AI, and we'll invite Zoom to take the minutes too, and I'll send you both sets of minutes, and I'd be really interested in your feedback, compare and contrast Scott's minutes to Zoom AI's minutes. Well, after the meeting finished, I spent about an hour tidying up my notes, making sure that I'd identified as much as I could remember what actually happened in that discussion. I should have been paying more attention, and some action points for some people, some of which I got right and some of which I got wrong. And then I sent it over to everybody. It took me about an hour. Of course, Zoom did it in less than 1 minute and sent everybody a very comprehensive set of minutes with clear action points for every individual, which were remarkably more accurate than mine. So I've been sacked. I haven't got that job anymore, thankfully. So no more minute taking. Well done. Thank you, Zoom. And then, perhaps most interestingly, since I've been asked to do this presentation, my university has changed and revised its guidance to staff and students on using AI 4 times since I was asked just to come and do this. Things are changing so quickly. And we're struggling, aren't we, a little bit as universities, a higher education sector, to figure out how do we manage this? How do we put the guardrails in? How do we put the safeguards in? And how can we use this in a sensible way to enhance our teaching and learning? We're being given guidance on what we could use, shouldn't use. Somebody said yesterday, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And our university wrote a paper called The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly of AI. And then we told them that that was probably not culturally appropriate, so we changed the title. So let's go back very quickly just to kind of set the context for this, and then we're going to get into the meat of things. ChatGPT was launched on at the very end of November 2022. Within 2 months, it had 100 million users. Today, there are over 200 million users every week engaging with ChatGPT alone. Okay, so what? It's just a number. But let's put that number in context for a minute. Okay, by contrast, TikTok took 9 months to get 100 million users. Facebook, 4.5 years. And Twitter, or X, 5.5 years. In fact, if you look at some of the other detail here, I love this graphic, if you can see it, it paints an incredible picture at the pace at which this technology is being adopted and, dare I add, adapted as well. These are changing times, and I'm absolutely confident as I stand here before you that AI is here to stay. So those people who think it's just a momentary thing that's going to pass through and then disappear soon, so I haven't got to worry about it, it's here to stay. So I started to explore how others within the case community are engaging with this. There's quite a lot coming out of Harvard, not surprisingly. And only 2 weeks ago, I found solace from a professor who's probably a bit like me. He's struggling to believe. I may be a case scholar, and I'm quite confident about calling myself a case scholar. Am I an AI scholar? Well, nobody pressed I'm an expert on the survey, did they? And I had a go, and I didn't put I'm an expert either. But I'm trying to keep up with this. And so we've got a paper here from Scott Anthony from a university in New Hampshire who decided to exercise some AI sprints, as he called it. They're just little experimental moments in the class with their students, and they're co-creating, they're playing, and they're working through things together. And he concludes, you don't have to be an AI expert. The 4 of us had some experience with Gen AI tools. That's the 4 of his academic colleagues. By the end of the class, a few weeks later, not only did our students report a rich learning experience and deliver impressive work, but we also had advanced our own understanding of these technologies. So I want to encourage you, give yourselves permission to go and play. Have an honest conversation with your students. Let them play with you, and let's be a learning community, co-creating together. Just a few weeks earlier, a slightly more dismal paper from Harvard about some of the critical problems that Gen AI poses for learning. And I'm not going to go into the context of this, but I did pick out one headline at the beginning. British education expert Sir Anthony Selden has predicted that by 2027, AI will replace human teachers on a global scale. We're doomed. We're doomed. We're finished. We've got 2 years left, guys. So let's make the most of it, shall we? If we're going to believe this sort of prediction. Should we move on from this quickly? I think we should. Okay. So for me, as I start to immerse myself in how we can engage with AI for case writing, I need to go back to first principles, what good case writing is all about. And as I've already shared with the Case Center and with other partners, I go regularly running workshops with scholars like an academic community here, running workshops 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, looking at how to enhance our case teaching and our case writing. And I'm reminded as I speak to people from around the world, we'll go to Harvard first, that case instructors facilitate discussion, students respond to questions, build on each other's comments, disagree with one another, ask questions, try out different points of view. So if I'm going to engage with AI, I need to make sure that we're producing something that's synonymous with what we're reading here. Go to Hong Kong. The case method is a powerful approach to teaching. It's question-oriented to enable students to participate in real-life decision-making. So we need to bring that slice of reality. We need to protect and safeguard that slice of reality that we're bringing into the classroom. Let me make it really clear, I'm not advocating using AI to create fictional cases. I'm not interested in that because my students are not interested in that. My question is, how can we use AI to enhance our case writing as a collaborative tool alongside all of the other resources that we use when we're researching an organization to develop our case study? So that's where we're at on this conversation now. Let's move on. IMD in Switzerland, the case is a description of a real situation with a protagonist. So cases that come alive because they involve people. We can step into the shoes of some of the characters in the case study, that willing suspension of disbelief, and we can immerse ourselves into the narrative structure. So we need to see how AI is going to help us to bring that case alive by making sure that we're bringing in real people. And sometimes when we look at this, we remember that opinions are more important than facts. So how is AI engaging with opinion as opposed to simply reported fact? And then to my good friend Tayi at the Rotterdam School of Management Case Development Center, she says the teaching case is vivid, realistic, convincing. Is AI going to give us that vivid, realistic, and convincing experience? It takes the role of the decision maker, enabling students to be analytical and creative. So all of these are some of the ingredients that we need to safeguard in the pot as case writers. And we need to ask ourselves, how is AI going to, how are we going to safeguard these, and how could AI enhance some of these areas and themes as ingredients for case writing? And finally, from India, we need to make sure that we're developing our own style, both as case teachers and as case writers. And there's much that's been said about the challenge of ensuring that, that if we're engaging with AI, that we ensure that we still respect the different cultural contexts to which we're writing our cases. Who's our target student group? Are we writing in a style that is appropriate to be received by that group? Are we respecting different cultural norms when we're looking at engaging in different parts of the world as case writers or with different types of learner groups? Finally, back to Harvard, to my hero, Professor Malcolm McNair, who was an emeritus professor at Harvard. He was a professor of retail strategy. But actually, more importantly, he did his major in English literature. So he's a Shakespearean. So he knows a thing or two about literature and about narrative style. And he says, well, the case study is a distinct literary form. It's not a poem. It's not purely a narrative, but it does have some important elements of narration. Not purely exposition, not just argumentation, but it may have important elements of argumentation. It's not just fiction, but it may have important elements of a detective story, spoken like a true literary academic scholar. So how are we capturing the essence of that when we're engaging with the case method using AI? How are we ensuring that we're honoring all of these key facets of our case writing when we're working with AI? I think if anything's important enough as a researcher, then I'm reasonably sure at some point McKinsey will have written a report about it. So I had a look, and sure enough, just a few months into the birth of AI, McKinsey had written 15 different charts on AI. I thought, well, that's a good starting point. Now, this is way out of date now, but as they started to track some of the different applications, even within the first 6 months of the launch of ChatGPT, I started to identify different applications and how they could relate to the case method. Case writing, tutorial support, case analysis, gathering and generating data, using AI tools to enhance imagery, where we're looking to enhance the visual experience of the case method, using AI within role play and simulation, and the resources and creative thinking that AI can bring to the mind there. And then I thought, well, hold on a second. If I was going to have a member of staff join me in the business school, and I wanted to know if they were any good at what I wanted to recruit them to do, I would interview them, and I would say, are you any good at entrepreneurship? Tell me what you know. So I thought I should interview ChatGPT. So last week, I went on ChatGPT, and I said, on OpenAI, and I said, in 400 words, how good are you at this? And I was very surprised by what they said. I actually asked this question in Easter, and I've compared the two responses. And it's quite interesting how much within 6 months AI has enhanced and reviewed its thinking on how useful it is to support management education. I think ChatGPT knew that this was a job interview, so listen to some of the language on this. AI is transforming management education, oh yeah, by enhancing the case method. Goes on to say, the case method, which encourages students to analyze real-world business scenarios and develop critical thinking and decision-making skills, is greatly enriched by OpenAI offerings. My goodness, ChatGPT really does want the job, doesn't it? So it went on, and it gave me 400 words in 5 different headings about how we could use it for enhancing analysis, for role-playing and simulations. I won't give you the small print now, but you can see it later if you want. Facilitating collaborative learning, scalable support for us, bridging accessibility gaps. Yesterday, Vicky was talking about equality, diversity, and inclusion in our case classrooms. And ChatGPT has a thing or two to say about that. And then it concludes by saying, by integrating OpenAI's technologies, management education can elevate the case method to new heights. They really do want the job. Making it more interactive, insightful, accessible for students and educators alike. This AI-driven approach ensures that learners are well prepared for the complexities of real-world management challenges. Does it get the job? It really wants the job, doesn't it? It wants the job. So I thought, well, hey, I need to put this to the test. Is this as good as, are they as good as they say they are? And one of my colleagues, a senior lecturer in PR, came to me and he said, Scott, I'd really like your help. I'd like you to help me write a case study. What I didn't realize at the time is what he really meant was, will you write a case study for me? But I said, okay, Paolo, what are we going to do? He said, well, have you heard about Boeing? I said, well, I've heard of Boeing. And he said, well, you know, they're having some real troubles with whistleblowers, and they're having trouble with their technology, and things are going wrong with their planes, and their reputation is in a real mess. And I look at PR, he said, so could you help me to write the Boeing case study about the challenges, the reputational challenges it's facing right now? And I said, well, I can help you with this, but you're the PR expert, so you've got to work with me on this. And I said, but can I make a request? And he said, yeah. I said, can we invite ChatGPT or AI to help us as well? He said, I haven't got a clue how that works. I said, well, that's fine. Let's work on this together. Let's journey together on this. This was about Easter. I said, by the way, who do you know in Boeing? Who are we going to talk to? I said, I don't know anybody. I said, okay, so we are probably going to be engaging principally with published resources. And he said, well, I'm guessing so. And that's okay. If you look at the Case Center's list of its award-winning, best-selling case studies, over 50% of them are sourced from purely published resources, okay? So that's your permission moment for those of you that are wanting to write that case study, but you're really struggling to get into the organization. You've got lots of secondary data, but you just can't get access. So there's plenty of very good cases available that are based on purely published resources. Traditionally, the case method evolved out of working with primary research, getting into the organization under the skin. I'm still a great believer that they provide some of the richest case experiences, but there are many, many good award-winning cases that are based purely on published resources. So I said, okay, let's look at this together. Can you remember at the beginning of the year, Alaska Airlines, this was the image where their door blew out at 16,000 feet, and the boy who was sitting, the teenage boy who was sitting on that seat, thankfully strapped in, his shirt was literally torn off him and lost. And this is a Boeing plane. It safely landed. Everybody was safe. And so this started a whole catalog of challenges about some of the technical difficulties facing Boeing. I'm mindful that there were whistleblowing things happening. There were senators in the US who were raising challenges about Boeing and its practices. And so we started to gather lots of information, as you would normally do as case writers. But I thought, well, let's see what ChatGPT has to say. So this is how not to use ChatGPT, okay? This is Scott not having a clue what I'm doing, so learn from my mistakes. So the first thing I said was, first attempt. We logged in, we set up our own ID with OpenAI, and we said, what problems are Boeing facing in 2,000 words? Send. And lo and behold, we got an extensive report with a title, Navigating Turbulent Skies, Analyzing Boeing's Challenges in the Aviation Industry. I thought, I could use that. That's a helpful title. I hadn't thought about that. I like that. Let's go with that for now. And then I read the report, which was broken into 5 sections, and it was okay, but it was kind of vague. There were generalizations. There were no examples, no specific individuals named, but it was interesting. Okay, so we went on, and I thought, well, let's say, well, what are whistleblowers saying about Boeing, and how are the authorities responding in 2,000 words? So this is my second attempt. And this time around, I got an extensive 2,000 report that started with this line. As of my last update in January 2022, Boeing has faced, and I'm thinking, hold on a minute. Now bear with me on this, because the world has moved on. But at this point in time, I couldn't get access to real-time data. I checked this out. Third attempt, tell me about the Alaska air blowout in 2024. And its response was, it's possible that this event occurred after my last update in January 2022. I don't have access to real-time information. I thought, now I know that I could log in, I could pay for something different, and I could get access to better information, but I was aware of some of the challenges that places on accessing information. I'll come back to this in a minute. On my fourth attempt, I said to my friend Paolo, come on, let's do this differently. We've already identified lots and lots of sources of interesting information about Boeing that could inform this. So let's capture all of that relevant content, including all of the citations and all of the different comments and quotations that different people have given. And let's put all of that into one Word document. And then let's go into ChatGPT and put in the question, the command, turn the following text into a 2,000-word case study entitled Navigating Turbulent Skies, using the following text. And then I cut and paste all of that text that we had gathered about the subject matter. And we were pleasantly pleased with the response that we got at the time. It gave us an introduction, it gave us a conclusion, there were 9 different sections, and it was an interesting, although still rather descriptive report. At this point, I had to start thinking back to first principles. Am I going to be driven by ChatGPT? What do I understand and know of the true values of the case method? I went back to my friend, Professor Malcolm McNair. I say my friend, he died a long, long time ago, but he's my hero, who used to say frequently that the primary purpose as a case writer is to create interest and a willing suspension of disbelief. In other words, we're no longer students in the classroom, we immerse ourselves into the case narrative. And to do that, we need to rethink 4 structures. We need to think about the time structure, the narrative, the plot, and the expository structure. Is our AI going to understand this? Is it going to help us with this? So our time structure, the historical sequence events, as Vicky said yesterday, always write in the past tense unless using reported speech. Well, the tense in my report was all over the place. So we've got to work on that. Avoid present tense, use reported speech. And how are you going to sequence your chronology? How are you going to structure that to allow for an immersive journey with our students? The narrative structure, how are we writing this in an appropriate way to engage, using the right types of words to engage our learners and to draw them into the narrative, the unfolding of a story? The expository structure, what are we providing in the case and what are we hiding a little bit in the case to encourage a deeper search, to encourage people to delve deeper and to unearth information through their own explorations? How explicit are we making information? These are decisions that we make. And so ultimately, I started to ask these questions. Finally, the plot structure. What about the drama within the case? What about the crisis? What about where opinions are more important than facts? What about the different behaviors and actions of the individuals? How are they being captured when we're working with AI to help inform this practice? So as a result, we went back to this Boeing case study. We've got it here. We decided that we wanted to break the case study down into 3 cases, a case A, B, and C, that would have a different time zone for each of those 3 cases. We decided that we needed to amend the tense that had been represented. We needed to change the case opener to give a sense of urgency. We realized that we needed to reintroduce the real stakeholders and to bring in more quotations to bring the case alive and to break it down into a case A, B, and C. And in doing so, we're now testing that case study out in the classroom. But of course, at the end of the day, we also know, I'm just going to move through this for a moment, that no, I won't do. I will just go back for a second. We also know that when we're writing cases, we have to make sure we've got an appropriate teaching note, a map, the journeys through the case that can enable us to be able to best make use of this case data. Last week, I went back into my Gen AI and I said, tell me about the Alaska Airlines, and it gave me a very clear, full report. So Gen AI is caught up now. In many contexts, we can get real-time data now out of Gen AI. I said, what's the most recent changes that have been announced by Boeing? And I got changes and headlines from this current month, just past, that were shared, complete with citations, and so I could identify the sources of that information, where it had come from. So I punched in a very, very, very specific request to reproduce the Boeing case study to Gen AI, giving very, very clear guidance about this is for a case study for learning and teaching, who the student groups are, what the title should be, that it should be 3 cases, that it should include reported speech. It needs to draw attention to particularly the Alaska Air door dropout and recent whistleblower controversies. There should be a case A, B, and C, what those should be, the times for all 3 of them, and the number of words that each case should be. And sure enough, I had a brand new case study that was produced. In fact, before I started this, I started a stopwatch. And that's how long it took to create my case study. We were having a conversation yesterday. How long does it take to write a case study? I said, well, normally I probably allow about 3 months. Alongside all of the other stuff that I'm doing, probably around 3 months. For my Boeing case study that we talked about earlier, we probably did it in about 8 days, working with AI, but we had to invest an awful lot of ourselves still in the process. When I just punched that command in, it took me 6.5 minutes to write the text for that command, and then 1 minute and 1 second for the case to appear. I shared the case with my PR lecturer. He looked at it and he said, I could use that, but I prefer what we did earlier. I could use it, but I prefer what we did earlier. What we did earlier took time. This took 7 minutes and 31 seconds, and that's the challenge for us, isn't it? We're all busy people. Time is one of those constraints. I'm very mindful time is a constraint for me right now as well, although I'm accepting that I started a few minutes late. Ivy have commented on this. ChatGPT can easily write a short generic case. However, a well-designed structure of prompts is the key to generating a case plot from ChatGPT. Post-production is equally important. We're not handing over the reins to ChatGPT. It's just a tool to support us. He goes on to say, oftentimes authors will have to add something more that's vivid, real life, and even personal, since ChatGPT cases often lacks the vibe, the energy, and the emotion. There's some things it can do, but let's not lose control. If we want to enrich the learning experience for our students, then we need to make sure that we're engaging with this as a tool rather than letting it take control of the case writing process. Now, I haven't got time to go into any detail about the teaching note, but we have produced a teaching note for Boeing. We gave some rather precise instructions in the teaching note, and we were surprised by the quality. And we've gone back into this several times now and nuanced this with further instructions and very clear commands of what we expect. The teaching note's given us new ideas about role play. It's given us assignment questions. It's given us discussion points. It's given us briefings of model answers that we could consider that were effectively quite credible. So it was a very helpful tool to draw from, and it's now in the hands, that teaching note is now in the hands of my PR lecturer so that he can nuance it to the personal needs of his student. But we got that wrong, and here's the quick lessons learned from this. Because I'm a great believer, always been a great believer, that when you're writing cases, you're writing your map or your teaching notes in parallel and just slightly ahead of the case data itself, so that one is informing the other. You're always thinking about how this is going to work in the classroom. And what we did is we wrote the case, and then we wrote the teaching note afterwards. So now, with another case that we're working on at the moment, we're actually developing both of those in parallel at the same time. We're talking with ChatGPT, not just about our case, but about our teaching note, and we're working together to and fro, to make sure that we're actually creating two documents that work in harmony together, but on our terms. No assumptions, on our terms. We're putting in the commands that we need to achieve that. As I come into land, I'm very mindful when we asked the Case Centre about engagement with AI, and this was a conversation that Vicky alluded to yesterday as well. Currently, about 20% of the current cases that are coming into the Case Centre have had some reported usage of AI. These are the areas where case writers are saying this is how they're engaging with the case method through copy edit, proof text, producing metadata, writing the case, grammar checking. I'm very aware that all of these are useful tools that we use in a lot of our work now in the workplace. And those who are creating teaching notes and instructor materials, sometimes we're using AI to generate the ideas in the first place, to help develop assignments, citation management, grammar checking, proofreading for English, and translation into other languages too, to enhance the accessibility of their cases. Finally, I'm going to move on from ethical frameworks today. We had a little piece from Harvard not so long ago where they went out to some of their students and said, what are you doing as case students with AI? In fact, this was my favorite comment. I'm able to create my own ChatGPT, said one very clever student. It's trained on my class slides, my practice exams, and other materials from my teacher because this custom GPT can draw directly from these materials when answering prompts. I use it as a personalized tutor. I asked it to explain course concepts, to quiz me with practice problems. It's really great because it can be tailored to any class. So we're exploring. I know that some institutions are looking at customizing GPT for their own students to provide some ethical guided benchmarked guidelines for working with this technology as a personal tutor, a chatbot or whatever in the classroom. We're actually doing it differently because we've got a department of computing in my business school. So we've actually set the students the challenge to create the GPT for themselves. So each student's got their own personalized tutor that they use, right, and it's the first piece of coursework they do as soon as they start their course, and then they can use that for all of their modules through all their courses as a personal tutor that they can take into the classroom with them. Finally, we said, what advice, or rather Harvard asked, what advice would you give to you guys, to me and to you? This is what our students are saying. Become knowledgeable in Gen AI yourself. And you can help students understand the beneficial ways to use it and teach them how to do so effectively. AI is not just here to stay, it will only get better. Structure your courses accordingly, colleagues, they say. Lean into this change, embrace the upsides, mitigate the downsides. And at the bottom here, I'd recommend that professors don't shy away from encouraging students to use Gen AI in a constructive manner. It is important to drive its adoption among students and set appropriate guardrails necessary to ensure optimal learning outcomes. I'll go back to where I started. I'm the vice president of my Chamber of Commerce. Every encounter I have with a member of the business community today includes a conversation about AI. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody's using it. It's become an essential employability skill that I need to train my students to confidently use. But it actually starts with me, and it starts with my staff. And if I did that survey with my staff that we did at the beginning, I'd be very aware that the vast majority have very limited exposure to AI. And so I want to encourage us, maybe it's time to be brave, because we've only got 2 more years left of this job, haven't we? Thank you very much. Okay. Yes.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. I have 2 comments. The first one relates to, I'm not surprised that a couple of months ago we were here discussing whether to engage AI in our classes or not. Now we have to admit to this, and we have to propose how can we cope with it. Asking my students not to use AI, it's as if I'm asking them not to use a calculator. So it is there. This is number 1. So I agree on that. My second comment will take me back to the poll that you posted at the very beginning. And again, I'm not surprised, and I'm questioning why did most of people here agree that professors are going to make use of the AI, however, students will not. If you look at the percentages, you are going to find that towards strongly agree, most of us, we agree that we are going to benefit from the AI. However, students were in the range of 2 point something, which is neutral or disagree. And I was questioning this, but the answer came in your presentation when you said it's all about the post-production. It is obvious that we make use of the AI and we are working on it, so there is the post-production. However, students are making use of it as is. There is no post-production, and that's why we confirm that they are not making the best use out of it. They are taking the output, just posting it as an answer. So this is interesting for me. It's questionable, it's surprisingly, but I think this needs more to think about it.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. I would completely agree. We're very aware that guardrails and responsible guidance is needed for our student community. And I think the quicker that we can look at how we can interact in that space with our students, we're making it the very first module that every one of our students do when they first arrive now, because we recognize that if we don't, then AI equals AI. In other words, artificial intelligence equals academic integrity problems, yeah? So we're immediately faced with a huge number of AI academic integrity problems these days. And so to mitigate against this, the protectionist barriers is the wrong approach. And every university, my university, every university that I've spoken to, they began by putting all the protectionist arguments out there about guarding against use of. But actually, it's understanding how to embrace that technology responsibly. I've got somebody within my department whose name somewhere is with the tens of thousands of names as part of the original architecture of ChatGPT, because that's his world, that's what he does. And he said, this isn't going to go away. Bill Gates says this is a game changer. This is more significant than the introduction of the microprocessor, he said quite recently. So it's not going to go away. Our students are going to use it whether we want them to or not. So isn't it our responsibility as management educators to train them to use it responsibly so that they can understand how these tools can be used, just like we need to use it responsibly as case writers. So lessons need to be captured with our students, and it's probably our job to help to shape that thinking right early on in the induction narrative, I would say. But it's a very good point. Thank you. Sorry, yes.
I have the mic, so I'll go her. All right, so yesterday was a big discussion about the fact that proprietary information, that takes a long time, and the process is getting those approvals, those signatures about clearance of internal information. And it all would hit me with cases, what's wrong with just saying, instead of this company, you say this company in this line of business, in this problem, in this context, right? So how do you see ChatGPT responding to this and really making cases about a very generic, once you narrow it down to an industry, a sector, and external context, and you ask your search question depending on what discipline you're in, we're done. So how's it going to solve that one, and how do you see us moving in that direction?
Yeah, I'm very aware. I speak to a number of publishers, and there's a number of legal cases, high-profile legal cases about engagement with Gen AI and how that's shaping and creating challenges in the whole kind of publishing sector. There's a lot of really, really crappy books that have come out into Amazon over the last year that's just kind of swamped the market because people are just carelessly playing with hypothetical ideas and just letting Gen AI create. The challenge, I believe, is that our students deserve better than that. Our students are interested and captivated by real life stories. We've been, it's been a pleasure to catch up with some other international colleagues and speakers and hear some of the international stories. I'm not interested in hypotheticals. I'm interested in hearing stories, real things that change real lives that really matter in our business communities and in the different organizations that are represented. And time again, the true stories by far usurp fictional creative generalizations. And the problem, of course, with creating fictional cases or generalized narrative is that it's kind of unboundaried. Where does it end? It's a little bit like trying to pour milk onto the table. It just goes everywhere. And it's very hard to put some boundaries into that. You can't beat the real thing. And I'm absolutely not advocating trying to write fictionally, nor, of course, to start over-embellishing the story by inviting Gen AI to make up an entirely different narrative about Boeing, because otherwise I'm probably going to face Boeing's legal team rather quickly, and quite understandably. So there are some papers I've not had time to show on here, but they are included in the other paper that I referred to with the QR code, which look at some of the ethical challenges facing engagement with AI with the business community, and misreporting or misinforming. So I would say that most certainly we need to make sure that we're very clear about the sources of the information, we're very clear about the boundaries for our case writing, and that we're reporting, as it were, true reflections of real life challenges that are coming out of the business community. I would avoid overgeneralization because I don't think my students like it.
Yes. Thank you so much for the interesting presentation. It really tasted like the Worcester sauce. So I'm more interested into how we can, I'm not against using AI. My name is Dalia Al-Asami. I'm an assistant professor in the Egyptian Chinese University. But I'm more interested into how we democratize using of the AI. So AI will not stay for free for a long time. These companies has to make profit. So what we will do when we start depending this heavily and encourage our students and go deep into using these tools, and suddenly these tools will be not for free and you have to pay for it, especially for the underdeveloped or the not privileged areas like our area on the world. And I'm measuring this by what's happening now with the publishing ecosystem and the publishing field. I'm sorry, I don't see that the open access has benefited us by any means. It's now my responsibility to provide $6,000 or $7,000 to publish my paper. And that's a very big amount of money for someone like me if you also consider the exchange rates. So what if we're facing the same situation in a year or two with the AI, and now we're encouraging everybody to depend on it, and then it's for a lot amount of money to use it.
Okay, thank you. A good question. And we're crystal ball gazing a little bit, but I imagine that there were very similar conversations. Certainly, I had them when Google first came out. And what about why are we engaging with Google now and as a search engine? And what about when that starts to and yet today I don't seem to feel too traumatized by my capability to access information. I think that there are so many players in that space now that I think that actually there are safeguards being put in that ensure that that we're addressing some of those challenges, or we're seeing some of those challenges of accessibility being addressed. And I'm very aware that there's some very big voices talking about that makes that, as you would say, democratizes, gives access to all, that embraces some of those EDI challenges, if you like. I think that it's a quick-moving space, but at the moment, it seems to be a moving space that's bringing more parties into that world, that realm, that I think will enable access to be retained in some capacity or another, although arguably for some, there may be some challenges there, but it's very hard to predict what that future is going to look like. But I would say, you know, this is technology that's available to us today. And my challenge to my staff, on Wednesday, I'm meeting with all of my staff in the business school. They know that I'm here at the moment, so they said, come on, Scott, we need to talk about this when we get home. And I said, you're darn right we do. So we're going to be having this conversation with all of my staff on Wednesday at lunchtime, and I'm going to be reminding them, I'm not concerned about what happens in 2 years' time. I'm not concerned about what you did last year. I want to know what you're doing now with the technology that's available to us now, and how we're making the most of the opportunities that are arising for us. And at the moment, there's quite a lot of open access. So I'll be surprised if that disappears too quickly on the basis of the number of parties coming into the game at the moment. But it's a fair question. It could change.
Thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. I want to share something with you. In February 2024, I published a paper under the title of The Impact of Artificial Intelligence on Organizational Behavior, a risky tale between myth and reality for sustaining workforce. And I wanted to defend emotional intelligence, and I wanted the paper to fail and say that AI would never acknowledge and touch upon the basis of our workforce in different areas. To my surprise, 46.5% of the workforce generated between the age of 25 to 35, not even our age, was going to be affected. So I think that's a threatening thing for all positions, not only educators. I mean, if you think about AI as a not only as a helping tool, but I mean as intervening in all aspects of life.
I agree. And I think I alluded to that when I shared my opening insights that I'm aware of companies who are laying staff off because their jobs are no longer required. But I'm also aware of companies who are seeing the opportunities that investment in AI brings to upskill all staff and to actually enhance the staff opportunity and the developmental opportunity for staff. And I'm very aware of a number, you know, in my capacity working with business leaders all the time. A year ago, we were producing reports on our particular sector. And I have a sector report that I have to share every other month that influences policy and government and thinking around all of the different business disciplines. I bring the education report, somebody brings the transport report, somebody has the finance report, someone has the real estate report. And I was late preparing my report about a year ago at one of those meetings. So the night before, shortly before midnight, I went into my GPT and I said, please write an educational report for the Chamber of Commerce identifying the key challenges facing higher education today. Send in 200 words. And in about 11 seconds, I had my report. And I topped and tailed it, and I handed my report in. I have to vocalize my report, and I shared it with everybody in the room. And I said, oh, and by the way, the biggest number one challenge we're facing in higher education at the moment is how to understand and how to work with Gen AI. How much of my report that I've just shared with you do you think was my report, and how much of it do you think was Gen AI? And the guy next to me who represents insurance said, Scott, that was the best damn report I've ever heard you give. That must have been ChatGPT. So and that was a year ago. And I said, well, everything apart from the last paragraph was ChatGPT. He said, yeah, that was a pretty crappy last paragraph, Scott, but the rest was really good. Now, a year later, everybody in that group is working with AI, and they're talking about AI in their reporting. So I'm seeing how it's being embraced across all the different sectors within the business community.
But
things are changing. Now, I think there's a hand up at the back that I've got to acquiesce to. One final question, thank you. We could talk about this all day, guys, couldn't we? It's a hot potato, I appreciate that.
Not even a question, but more a suggestion, because all the comments resonated with me as well. The difficulty with AI is obviously verifying the content, not just the structure. But the way I would approach it is allowing the students to use it, but then not rating them on the quality of what they produce, but rather on how they verify what is genuine, what is correct, and basically let them correct their own work. That way, you teach them to use the tools, you teach them to be critical about it, and to find ways to verify it and become more efficient at it, because you get these papers and then you have to find where did they get the information from, and you need to read all of this. It takes ages, so let them do it, and you teach them what they need to know in order to mitigate those downsides.
Thank you. I'm quite happy to agree with that. Thank you. Thank you.
ازي حضرتك عامله ايه؟
Yes, yes, yes.
Hello? شيرين الساوند مش شغال. الساوند الاثنين مفتوحين ومش شغالين. Hello? May I ask you all please to be seated so that we can start? Marianne, shall we start? Are you ready? Ready? Okay. Yeah? Okay, so now we're honored. Okay, so now for the next 20 minutes, we'll be having a short talk about how we can drive sustainability via case studies. And we are honored that we have Dr. Marianne Mati with us from Gibbs Business School in University of Pretoria, South Africa. Welcome, Marianne, to Cairo, and we're so happy that you managed to make it. This is open.
All right, good morning, everyone. It is so lovely to see you, and it's so lovely to be here. Thank you very much for the privilege, and a special thank you to Sherwood and Prime Africa for the opportunity to showcase a little bit more about the opportunity that cases have in order to showcase sustainability. So maybe to start off with, I would like to ask, who of you have written a case that has a specific sustainability focus? Are there anyone? Okay, so that's a good question, Michael. How do you define sustainability? Yes, yes.
SDG, right?
So we're thinking more SDG. Yes, no, Michael is, so absolutely, we're thinking more SDG, but we're thinking further than just financial sustainability. So looking at the environment, but even further than the environment, the social aspects. So anyone who's written a case on one of the SDGs or specific focus areas to that. All right, tell me about your case. Yes.
The social and the CSR and all that stuff. So I covered that in a case. They thought, because they brought in new investors to their company, that the economic part of the company would actually stop their social activities in the CSR, and they were afraid. And this is really what happened. The culture divided into two cultures in the company, and they tried to keep and sustain their social activities but they had a problem of when they tried to sustain economically, they developed two cultures.
Oh, that's
and that was a problem.
And that shows that real dilemma that companies face in terms of looking after the social element and also the financial sustainability. So that's
Yes.
such a good example.
It is.
All right, so anyone else? Okay, so I would like to show you two of our cases. So as Ejni said, I'm from Gibbs, and we actually have come a long way, and Albert is also here. He's our case hub, the head of our case hub. We've come a long way in creating a culture in where we are very proud to write teaching cases. And I think this creation of culture has led to amazing stories, and more our stories center around sustainability issues more broadly defined. So I want to introduce you to two cases, and these are cases that highlight the very complex dilemmas that companies face with sustainability issues. So this is a case that was published by two of our faculty members on flooding that happened suddenly in April 2022 in Durban, which is the coastal, it's a coastal town. And so it started to flood, infrastructure was underwater, and Toyota, this is the Toyota South Africa Motors plant. It was completely underwater, and to add to the challenge, a number of workers were stranded in the facility, and they faced with this rising floodwaters. So it is a real sudden dilemma that this company faced in order to try to salvage the plant and also save the lives of the people who were stuck. So this is an immediate dilemma that was created by this huge flooding. Another case, and this is one that I was privileged to be part of, is on a large petrochemical manufacturer in South Africa, which is called Sasol. And Sasol, along with Eskom, which is our electricity SOE, accounts for more than 50% of the country's greenhouse gas emissions. And so Sasol has committed to the just energy transition, but the challenge in South Africa is that, yes, we need to transition to cleaner energy. However, the coal mining industry is really big and has a lot of people who are dependent on it for their livelihoods. A lot of communities are centered around the coal mines, and if Sasol, for example, were to transition away from coal, what happens to these communities? What happens to their families? What happens to the supply chain? So it has a real big ripple effect should this company, well, in this company's transition away from coal. So I think here we can see that now suddenly the dilemma is not as immediate as flooding in that we saw in the Toyota plant, but here this company needs to strategize, and how are they going to do this very trade-off that you explained as well, in terms of balancing our economic viability, but also looking after what happens to these communities. So I think the next question then is, if we kind of think about sustainability cases and sustainability then in a broader sense, what then would you say are the characteristics of a sustainability-focused case? So sustainability-focused cases then, as Michael pointed out, are really centered around the SDGs. So it's really thinking about how do we solve for the SDGs. But what I have here is to try to kind of summarize elements in sustainability cases that make them a little bit different from, I want to say, traditional cases in inverted commas, because I think we all realize that sustainability issues are complex. They are complex and they require, in many cases, working with different stakeholders. So in the case of Sasol, or as your example, there are definite trade-offs involved when thinking about sustainability issues and when saying, okay, we are going to transition or we want to employ more sustainability type of practices. What are the stakeholder dynamics of those decisions? What are the trade-offs? And what are the long-term impacts? Because there's always that question around stakeholders versus shareholders. And oftentimes, as we also saw in our Sasol case, is that the stakeholder dynamics are really, really important. Because now, if this company makes a decision, it doesn't only affect them. It affects these communities, it affects many people who already live in a province that has very high inequality numbers, very high levels of unemployment. So the social aspect is really, really important. So I think sustainability cases are really ones that try to elevate or showcase these complexities, in that these complexities don't have simple answers, and we need to interrogate these answers and the trade-offs so much more. And then often these decisions and complex decisions need to be made under uncertainty. And I think the Toyota plant one shows that. Because with increasing climate change, with increasing social pressures, companies need to make decisions under uncertainty, and they need to have a clear plan on how to do that. But what I also think sustainability cases allows us to illustrate are the innovative solutions that companies come up with in order to mitigate for sustainability challenges that we have. So for example, in South Africa, we had a number of years where we had very poor electricity supply. So that's putting it very politely. We had what we call load shedding. So it is a term where our power is switched off from time to time, and different regions have different times when they do not have power. And so as a result of that, a lot of businesses and households have actually invested in solar. And a lot of companies have come up with innovative solutions in providing solar, especially to underserved areas. And so these innovative solutions are also very important to showcase, to say, okay, but how do we adapt to these challenging environments? And as a result of that, South Africa is well on its way in order to move away from coal because of what has happened with our electricity supplier. For me, also an exceptional case study based on sustainability requires collaborative and often multidisciplinary approaches. Because the answers to these complex sustainability-focused questions do not lie in one discipline only. And often it requires us to work together multidisciplinary. And I think that is the privilege that we have at business schools, is to have colleagues that teach in different subjects, that are experts in different subjects and different literature and theories. And we need to combine our forces and do multidisciplinary work together, because that is what we need in order to get these answers. So for example, I'm an economist, and our case on Sasol has a very big economic focus to say, how does this developing country transition away from coal, given the socio-economic challenges that we have? But at the same time, for this Sasol, for this big company, stakeholder dynamics and stakeholder relationships are really important. So how do we think about the stakeholders involved, and how should this company navigate its strategy in order to move away from coal? So therefore, I think really good sustainability cases can incorporate multiple theories, and it can be taught in multiple courses. So my case on Sasol, for example, I can teach it in my economics class to show what are the economic implications of moving away from coal. But it's also very valuable to teach in strategy, because to say how as a business should you look at stakeholder relationships and navigate through that. So I think a sustainability case often can be taught in more than one place, and therefore multidisciplinary collaborations is the way to go. So I really think that the goal that we have as educators and as leaders are to equip our students with the tools they need to navigate increasingly uncertain world that we live in. I mean, the flooding, we just had a conversation over dinner about the flooding in the UK, the flooding in Spain. So we all have these similar challenges, and we need to equip our students to navigate this increasingly uncertain world. So for me, case studies provide a powerful platform in order to demonstrate sustainability in action. Because oftentimes I think these things are very abstract, because there are so many different variables. Having a story and the power of a story of a company grappling with a sustainability issue brings it home to students and to leaders in order to learn from how to navigate this, and maybe also to learn from innovative ways in order to adjust in this or mitigate this uncertainty. So bringing it a little bit back to the prime principles, cases have also, can also be a very valuable tool to showcase sustainability practices by illustrating the prime principles. Now the prime principles, oh, let me get out of the way a little bit, sorry. The prime principles you'll find on the prime website, but they generally include purpose, values, teaching, research, partnering, practice, and sharing. And so I think we can also be mindful in the way in which we write cases to reflect these principles in the case. Now, I did a little bit of research, so what it really bothers me at home is all the electronic waste that we have. It's just piling up. And so I did a little bit of research, and what I came across, I'm not sure how many of you actually are on this app. How many of you have this app? So it's an e-waste app that was developed in Egypt in order to try to collect e-waste, and the plans are to eventually use this e-waste and to recycle them. And so I think this is a case that needs to be written by our Egyptian colleagues. So this e-waste app is actually can be a great example to illustrate the prime principles, because it talks about the circular economy, in how e-waste can actually help to create jobs. It talks about partnering, because there you can see the partners that were involved in order to bring about this app, and how this can then actually be scaled. So there's a lot of opportunity in these sustainability type of topics in order to showcase the prime principles. So my learnings in terms of how to write sustainability cases, I want to share with you a few of those that maybe for those of you who are starting out writing cases, or who want to think about this as a domain to write cases about. So here are a few of my learnings. So I think the main thing, and this actually resonates very much with what the panels yesterday spoke about, but maybe just to reiterate them a little bit more, I think the main thing that you need to start off with is to define your learning objectives. So what insights do you want the audience to have? So who is your audience and what should they take away? And this you need to link with the theory. So what is a theory or theory basis that you want the students to master, and how can these theories then help them to develop actionable solutions? Because you want them to start thinking critically about these very complex issues. And so the learning objectives, I think, is a really good starting point to all of this. But then it is important, and I think nowadays there are more and more opportunities to find current and relatable sustainability issues. It's almost like these types of topics are abound. And choosing these topics that would relate to a student, especially in their professional environments. But I think it is a great sustainability case has a protagonist that you can relate to. And these protagonists, I think it's also very important to have different voices of protagonists. And that is, Vicky, your point that you made yesterday as well. We also want protagonists who are female leaders, not protagonists who represent different citizenships. Oh, I'm not sure if that is the right word. But you want a greater diversity of protagonists, and that makes it really relatable. Because why do we have a protagonist? Scott also said it in his talk. You basically want the students to stand in the shoes of the person who is dealing with this dilemma. So you want this student to stand in the shoes of the CEO of Toyota South Africa, and for them to get this sense of urgency that there is now chaos, this plant is underwater, how do we solve this? or you want them to be in the shoes of our protagonist, Shamini, who needs to navigate this huge organization in this just economic transformation, but in a country like South Africa where we have huge inequality and poverty challenges. Then I think my other learning and word of advice is to collaborate. And that is why I enjoyed yesterday's presentation with the industry leaders. It was amazing because that is the way in which we need to think about writing these cases. We need to collaborate with industries. And as I mentioned, multidisciplinary approaches add depth to these complex conversations in sustainability cases. Another learning is that you need to highlight stakeholder dynamics. So how are different groups affected? It can be governments, communities, employees, shareholders, and NGOs. How are they all affected by this dilemma that you are positioning? So it is a perspective that involves a whole host of different stakeholders, not just the company itself. And then I think teaching notes are really, really useful. Teaching notes have been emphasized a lot, but I want to add one thing to teaching notes is that you can also spend a lot of time in exhibits in teaching notes, in making visuals and summaries for the person who is teaching this case. And these visuals are actually so powerful in transporting the learnings in the classroom to the business contexts. So take some time to think about that. And then my last learning in terms of case case writing is I think more and more we can think about ways in which we can introduce skill sets to students that contributes to a more holistic view or a more holistic skill set that students can develop. And I would like you to go and check out the Prime I5 program, where they have identified key skills that our young leaders need. So these are skills like make learning meaningful or develop social interaction. So these are all principles that you need in order to build a holistic skill set that is needed to tackle sustainability challenges. So how do you think about incorporating these principles in the writing of your case, but especially in your teaching note? How do you build in exercises in the class in order to kind of give this pedagogical view to build a holistic skill set of your students? So sustainability cases are also very challenging, I think, to write. Sometimes the topics are very sensitive, and the complexity that makes sustainability cases great often also it's difficult to write, because you need to balance these different stakeholders' views, and companies might also not be very forthcoming in terms of their practices, and you must be very wary of things like greenwashing or them pretending to be very sustainable but actually not so much. So I think be aware of the pitfalls of writing sustainability cases. I think if you have multiple voices in a case, that is one way to overcome some of these pitfalls. So to interview not only the company, but also the different stakeholders. So almost like triangulating your story and getting those voices in the cases itself. And sometimes it's easier to go the secondary data route. We have had colleagues who wrote about very difficult ethical cases, and then the case just is not signed off. So then the idea, you can go the secondary data route and write a case that has been about a topic that has been highly publicized. I think like Scott's Boeing example earlier. So my last point is to really say that I'm really encouraged by the conversation that we've been having here, especially in the comments that were made in that we need to highlight the voices and the stories of the developing country context of the MEA region, and especially, I think, in sustainability, in the sustainability side. So yes, of course, we say that dealing with flooding and some sustainability issues, there are global principles that we can take from that. However, there are also very interesting learnings that we can take from very specific examples in certain contexts where adaptation was made in order to mitigate against sustainability issues. So there's learning from other country contexts. I think, Michael, you also made that point yesterday. So therefore, I think there's a whole host of work that we can do in order to foster more cases around sustainability issues, and they are wide-ranging. I mean, you can look at mining, you can look at gender, you can look at food waste, you can look at conservation, you can look at urban resilience, at energy transitions. So there's a lot of work that we can do and that still has to be done. And I think in showcasing different contexts really adds to the richness of the narrative in our understanding on how to tackle sustainability issues. So just 2 examples of, in our case hub, how we have written cases on these issues. This is a case that was published by Emerald, showcasing social entrepreneurship and how social entrepreneurship deals with a lot of waste that we see in urban areas. And I had to put in a rhino because, of course, being from South Africa, this is an NGO, and this case centers around how does this NGO partner with government and with the private sector in order to promote conservation. So, yeah, in conclusion, I think that case studies, especially on sustainability, is a call to action, and it really helps to develop our young leaders, our students. And in sustainability, we urgently need them to be thinking about these issues. So I think at the heart of all of this is to shape and empower global leaders, and case studies is a way in which we can do this. So thank you. Thank you, David.
Thank you so much, Marianne, for sharing these insights, and we're really looking forward to push sustainability further with the help of case studies. Thank you so much for sharing all your experiences. Thank you. And now we're having our 3rd panel, which is about how we can shape minds using case studies. And we'll be hearing from a diversified panel, including alumni, practitioners, and academics, about the power of case studies in changing the classroom experience and affecting even career further. So we'll be having Dr. Ayman Ismail, Associate Professor of Entrepreneurship, and Jamil Endowed Professor, and the founder of the Venture Lab here at the AUC. And we have Mr. Bassem Raouf, Managing Partner at the Boston Consulting Group. And we have Mr. Hussein please up to the panel. We have Mr. Hussein Muhyiddin, CEO of Robusta Technologies. We have Aya Hani, a very dear student and now a very dear alumnus working as a Senior Supply Chain Manager at Procter & Gamble. And we have Ahmed Noufal, Assistant Professor of Entrepreneurship at Emilian Business School in France. So we're very honored that we have this esteemed panel. So please join me in welcoming them.
Okay, Masal Khair. Good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to be moderating this fantastic panel, bringing the mix between industry, academia, practitioners, and people who use the cases every day and who actually will give us some interesting insights. I know that in the past couple of days you're looking at different angles, so this one is probably going to bring a very interesting industry angle. So let's just start from the beginning, just a quick intro about the context. So would love to hear from you, and I'll go just through everybody about what do you do for a living exactly. I think this would be an interesting context, and where do case studies feature in whatever you're doing. So let me start from the beginning with Hussein.
Hi everyone, I'm Hussein Mohiddin, CEO of Robusta Technology Group. So we've been working in technology for the past 15 years. Started as a startup doing web design work, and then we evolved with the evolution of technology. So we've been through the journey of building customer engagement over social media platform, over different types of customer applications. And right now, how we do it is we work with our partners on digital transformation programs, helping them build teams, products, and businesses.
Hussein, what does that have to do with case studies?
Yeah. So we do use case studies all the time. Either we use it as a way to research and analyze how other companies grew, how they approached similar problems to ours. And we've also been very lucky to have been featured in one of the case studies by the KCC early on in our journey. So maybe in 2015 or something, maybe 3 years after we started. And this case study has been pivotal to our relationship with AUC and with academia in general. I can expand on this. Do you want to do it now or later?
We'll talk a little bit about this case extensively, because I think it's very interesting to have a company that had a case written on it. Bassem, so you're at the Boston Consulting Group, and you live in cases.
Sure. So first of all, it's great to be back on campus. Actually, I'm an alum of AUC in 2008, if I remember correctly, not just a few years back. So great to be back again. And if I reflect on your question, maybe I skipped the introduction. BCG is simply one of the top consulting firms. But really where I kind of maybe personally connect with the topic today is, I remember when I was interviewing for consulting a long time ago, there was no such thing as case studies on campus or any of the things. Like these were typically, business school type of, content. So we had to practice outside of the classroom, if I may say, cases and so on and so forth. So, of course, today, happy to reflect on this from our personal experience, having gone through that learning now to see a whole center just simply dedicated to this with a great community. And, of course, what do case studies mean in the context of BCG, which is, of course, the day-to-day work that we do. Looking forward.
Fantastic. And Aya, you are at Procter & Gamble. So what do you do there?
Yeah. So currently I'm the supply chain leader for Pampers in South Africa. So, and we're facing all the load shedding and the solar panels that need to be up there. So I'm facing this every single day with the plant. However, if I'm going to introduce myself in this context, so yesterday Michael was talking about the impact of case studies. I believe I'm one of those who've been impacted. I graduated in 2020 from AUC, actually from the School of Engineering, but everyone thinks I'm a School of Business student, and I believe that as well. I was a participant in many case competitions. I won the Engineering and Commerce case competition in Montreal, Canada, and some of the local competitions as well as being a co-founding student for the first international case competition in AUC. So I've touched base with competitions holistically.
Fantastic. Thank you, Aya. And Ahmed, professor, you are actually one of the probably most relevant users, consumers of case studies, as well as writers.
Yes, so I think I'm the second academic after you in the panel as well. So, basically, I'm a professor of entrepreneurship at EM Lyon Business School. So my research is focused basically on entrepreneurship, which makes it very critical for us, the case studies that we use in general. So you've got like many international students from everywhere in the world. So sometimes you're bringing cases not to present companies only, but to represent continents. So it's very important there. It differs a lot across the different programs. So teaching for doctoral students is very different from teaching for undergrads, from MBAs, DBAs. So it's basically you're delivering a message and you're trying to bring a real world model into the classroom. And this is definitely not possible without a case study in the room. So yeah, it's very relevant for us.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. And just for myself, because I would consider myself the fifth panelist on the panel, I've always used case studies in my classrooms. And at the beginning, when I started teaching entrepreneurship about 15 years ago, we did not have local cases, so I had to look for articles in journals, publications that I could use as cases, and some of them became very influential with the students and inspired them actually to start companies. And then later on, I started actually writing case studies on those companies, teaching them, but also bring the entrepreneurs to class. The first startup in the case competition was Swivel, an Egyptian company that became a unicorn. We wrote the case, we had the entrepreneur actually in the case competition, working with the students and then talking at the end and then judging their actually solutions for that case. So from that part, I'm very passionate about bringing those cases to life, especially the local part to the classroom. So let me start with Bassem. Bassem, consulting is about case studies, and actually your projects, you probably call them cases, and every 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, depending on the duration, you're actually in a new case. So that's actually what you do for a living. So tell us a little bit about this. What does a case mean in your context? How do you structure a case? How do you think about it as a consultant?
Sure, absolutely. So of course, in the in the context of consulting, typically we start a project by who is the client, because who's the client really helps us understand also the context of where this client operates. Is this a local client? Is this an international client looking to enter the market? So really understanding, and I'm trying to reflect, obviously, when we read a case, really trying to understand who's the main character of the case is really important. So that's one, who's the client? Then, okay, what are we trying to solve for? Is this maybe a problem that the client is facing, or is this a potential business opportunity that the client would like to address? And then we kind of think together, okay, what is the available data? What do we need to complement with? So be it market research, so be it client data, and we structure that project or that case into multiple work streams that the team is responsible for to deliver. And of course, sounds very simple, but what is really interesting is that no case is the same, and it's amazing, right? How after my humble 15 years plus experience, every time is a new learning, every time there's a new case, because one of the many variables of the case always changing, simply whether it's the economic context, simply whether it's even if it's the same industry, same practice, even same company, same client, in many cases, still there is something new. There's always a curveball that makes the case very interesting and very challenging, and also very rewarding for the team that is actually working on. So really, if I compare this versus like a theoretical kind of how we learn business concepts, or maybe frameworks and so on, when you really put it in the context of a client or a case, makes it really, really rewarding, because knowing all these other variables make you think about that theoretical framework in a very different way.
And in consulting, the word framework means a lot. Structuring a case means a lot. And you spend a lot of time at the beginning of all of your cases investing in that. Tell us a little bit about how that works and how that benefits from students who have received this kind of training.
Sure. So, framework is when we think about frameworks in the context of, if I may say, cracking a case, which is like a very prominent, popular tagline for those who are looking to join the consulting industry. When we think about a framework, it's simply kind of like a visual way, or somehow also kind of a logical way of how we dissect a big problem into its major puzzle pieces, right? And it's kind of a way to help us navigate a really complex problem or a very complex project, because usually, I mean, you would think, right, all the work that we get involved in, it's really, really, really interesting, but in a way that is also very complex. So the way we need to, crack this down into modules that we're able to solve for, right? And again, I don't want to bore you with frameworks. I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of them. But really, what is also very important, especially in today's world versus where consulting used to be, is that we need to be also very, again, maybe a bit cliche, but a bit more creative, innovative, and also very adaptive and agile of how we iterate on this framework. Because usually what we start the project with day one is potentially very, very different from where we really end up with the project, because there's a learning, there's like a discovery, journey that we go through, And we realized that we picked up on things that were not necessarily as obvious for us before, and we really tried to structure the thinking and the effort of what we're trying to solve for around these specific dimensions.
So this is where actually the real use of cases and case study education comes into space. Aya, you're one of those people who are really good in cracking cases. So tell us a little bit about your experience. What does that mean from the person who's solving a case, and how do you look at that case and the process of solving and cracking a case?
Okay, so first off, Karim Yassin was here yesterday, and he was talking about how the interviews on PNG focuses more on the skills of the person rather than their academics. And this was my path. So I was focusing on my extracurricular activities. I'm good academically. I was really good academically at school, but in university, I tried to make the balance. But then I was interested in case competitions, and I want to experience them, which is very academic. And it's focusing very much on the engineering aspect that I was studying while I'm spending all of my time in the School of Business. And then I really didn't know what I'd be doing in there. So once I started reading cases and trying to understand them, I started even asking the advice of people who were cracking cases in the ENGCOM competition. And one of the things I've heard was, go for the 80-20. It would be too much to get in the depth of every single case you do. But then I found that I believe in a very different path with tackling them, which was sometimes people read cases from very different perspectives, and the winner is the one who would actually understand what the real problem is. Sometimes it's not that clear. So in ENGCOM, there are 3 cases, 2 6-hour cases and 1 12-hour case. So they basically put us in a small room for 12 hours straight. And I remember the 12-hour case we had was for Bombardier. I love this case till this day. I remember every single minute of these 12 hours. And it was they wanted us to create a vehicle for businessmen to shorten the time of their travels for efficiency. So everyone was looking for the speed of the vehicle, trying to design a vehicle with speed. However, we found out when we did a focus group within the 12 hours that the problem was not the speed of vehicles. The problem was the time lost in the paperwork. So we created a vehicle, a hybrid vehicle that goes with electricity for sustainability, all this and that actually scans everybody's papers within the vehicle itself. So this was one point that helps me later on in my career, which is let's tackle the problem first. Sometimes we spend a lot of hours trying to solve specific problems that can be solved in 5 minutes if we understand the problem exactly. This along with a creative process with a multidisciplinary team. So we were 2 engineering students, 2 business students, which usually in the field as well, you'll be working with a lot of multidisciplinary mindsets. And you need to accept that at points, the other discipline would be even more beneficial to you.
And I want to build on that specific part. Most of us think about using business cases in business schools to teach business problems. You're an engineer, and ENGCOM as a competition is very special because it's multidisciplinary. You get 2 engineers and 2 people from the business side working together as a team. And I love that idea because it's a very different experience on how do you tackle problems. So tell us a little bit about that, and especially how do engineers benefit from case education?
So I believe case education in the engineering field is not as exposed as in the business schools. However, it made me realize how actually technical I can get. Like, we take the context of the numbers and the equations and we work with them all year long, but we don't apply them as much. And we don't know when we can apply them in the right context. And when we are in the field later on, sometimes this is not what we usually are faced with. But in the case studies, we are faced with the actual situations that are happening in the field. So we know what to use when, and we get exposed to the full bigger picture process. So I understand that right now I'm creating a product that, or a service at points, it's the same for each, that needs to be, while creating it, I need to be fully aware of that this will need to be attractive for a marketing plan later on, that we will be having a financial plan done for it, so I need to keep all this in mind. So it helps me have the bigger picture in a better way.
Fantastic. Let me jump to Hussein. Hussein, you had this case written about Robusta, and I would love that you tell us a little bit about it, and tell us about how every single project that you do, in a way, is actually very similar to a consulting project. It's a specific one that requires structuring in the same skill sets. But tell us a little bit about the case about Robusta.
Sure. Yeah, so this case we had covered from the KCC. I think it was very rewarding for us in many ways. The first one is, at the time, actually, the case is being written. I think this is a very good moment for the company to reflect on what we're doing, where our problems are, what our strategy is, what are key points in our data that are significant to our business. So this process in itself is a very good process for companies or businesses to do this sort of internal strategy review or reflections. So that's the first win for a company being covered in a case. The second one is obviously when a case gets published. This gives the story a new dimension. This provides credibility, being recognized as something significant to be studied. And this helps in building many bridges that we capitalize on later. So one of them is definitely being more accessible to talents, so more accessible to the students, whether undergrads or grads, knowing about the business during their courses and so on. This makes the company an attractive employer, but also the extension. In all the discussions we're invited to. So for this case, we got invited to business plan competitions. For example, one of them was covered during COVID, like building on this case study, how do you think this company should deal with the COVID situation of people working remotely, of international business getting affected and so on. So this was a very good, for example, snapshot. And in many other classes for entrepreneurship, we also got to discuss with the students, what do you think should be the strategy exercise for the expansion? How can you do it, building on the case? So this becomes a pillar or a platform for our business to build on with the university on building multiple dimensions. And I find this really rewarding. Like, we always think about how universities and corporates can work together, and always people jump into talking about research. But I think case studies are also a very good tool for companies to interact with universities.
Do you remember the dilemma of the case?
Ironically,
or what was the topic or theme of the case?
Yeah, I think you remember. Yeah, this was many years ago. So but I remember the recent reflections because we've had multiple interactions. So, for example, in the past year, yeah, one of them was covering our geographic expansion based on our strategy. But the initial starting point, I think, was more about the growth of the business as how to evolve from being an agency and differentiate in a fragmented and competitive environment.
And what was the process of writing the case from your side as the kind of the leader of the company that the case is written about it? How did that process look like from your side as someone interviewing you and asking you about the company and trying to articulate your process, your story, your narrative, your dilemma, and so on?
Yeah. So the process involved a lot of interviews with us, with myself and with my co-founders, a visit to our office, discussions with our team members, so more exploration. The surprising part was also the discoverability of our business back then, because we were still maybe 2 or 3 years old. So I think the choice or discovery beyond of what's hot and famous in the media. So this, I think, the curation of the cases that are worth covering is also important. And I assume there has been a lot of research beside the interviews, but we were sent like drafts to verify whether this is right or not, if this accurately captures our discussions and so on. So there was a back and forth with the case writer. And then the final published version was shared with us.
You think the narrative in the case really reflected what was happening in Robusta at the time?
Yeah, I think to a great extent. I think if anything, maybe more on our side, like we needed and we still need, it's an evolving process, how to communicate our problems and our ideas with more clarity, how to do more storytelling and so on. But I think the case captured big parts of what has been shared, and up to date. When I read this case study, I'm happy like we're following through the same perspectives that was shared a few years ago, which says this was really solid back then.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
Let me jump to Ahmed, the professor, who's actually the person who writes the cases, which brings the practice and the research and interactions with people like Hussein who are leaders in their business. What does the process of case writing look like from your side?
So the thing in general when it comes to the case writing, you want to represent many factors in a single case, which is really challenging at this case. So I remember, for instance, when I was a student, I would get exposed to the big companies, case studies like Microsoft, like Apple, the stories of Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, those type of exposures. And then afterwards, I would move to, because I went to different countries, I went to Italy, I went to the UK, and then eventually I landed in France. So each time I get exposed to different cases. So, and they are very different at the end. So what you mentioned at the beginning in terms of having like a case study that's tailored to a market that nobody else works on is something that's very challenging. And at the same time, you're trying to, so imagine like the KCC here, I think it's the only one known for case studies in the MENA region in general. So when it comes to this, you're trying to present and to represent all the different countries in Africa and the MENA region in a single case study is probably 3-4 pages, and that's the challenging part of it. So, yeah.
What does it look like writing a case, the actual experience of writing a case?
So writing the case in general, it's more like, so it's different than writing an essay, and it's different than writing a research topic. So because when it comes to research, you're trying to bring generalizability from everywhere. In this case, you're trying to go very deep in terms of what is really not captured by data. So for example, one thing you could imagine, so if you're sampling like firms or entrepreneurs or something of this sort, we have like a concept of selection bias. You've got only the majority of the people, but only a few are in the outliers, only a few are very successful, only a few get into the top success stories. So in this part, the writing itself that you have here, you're trying to bring something on board that nobody else has captured before, which is very challenging in there.
Any favorite cases that you wrote from the region?
So I used many cases. So I didn't write that much, but I used like swivel case study, for instance. So that was like the only one that we had on a Middle Eastern company, an Egyptian company, that went for a unicorn, despite that later that it lost the unicorn status. But in general, like to find like something, a unicorn in the MENA region like this, and give an idea about how it went through the different dynamics from a startup to a business that went for unicorn to failures to stuff like this. No, that's something that I wouldn't have captured anywhere else.
That's amazing. Let me go back to Bassem. Bassem, you also had your own personal experience as someone who studied using case studies during the MBA. So tell us a lot about this, a little bit reflecting on your experience as someone who received that case method
Sure,
learning.
absolutely. So a bit of background. So I also did my my MBA at London Business School, and of course LBS uses extensively the case method in education. And prior to that, obviously, again, I mentioned that I practiced a lot of case studies on my own before to get into consulting. This was back in 2008. So it's really good to have tried to do this on my own at the very beginning, if I may say, of course, with a lot of help from colleagues from the CAPS office back then, among others. And obviously, going with for some years in consulting, I think it was back then, like maybe I did 3 years in industry, and then I went to do my MBA, where we then got back into education, and it was amazing to see how the same write-up of a case gets to be perceived very differently, because of course you will know that in a context of an MBA classroom, you have maybe, I don't know, like 50 nationalities, different backgrounds, multiple industries, and we're obviously also grouped into teams of 6 to 8 along the year. And every group is meant to be different nationalities, different industries, and. So it's amazing when we come to the classroom and every group is meant to present their reflection of the case. How does every team takes a completely, I wouldn't say completely different, it's a very unique perspective, but it's kind of one lens at looking at the same problem, and it kind of how, of course, let's say the instructor kind of brings all this together kind of to create like an interesting narrative that no one can see on their own. So I really like how the case method used in the education context helps us really see the same problem also from different lenses. And I think this has been a very rewarding experience.
And Bassem, tell us also from a company perspective, you use cases for interviews extensively or maybe primarily. So what does that experience look like? Do you think that case interview method reflects actually what you're looking for in a potential candidate, consultant, employee? How do you use it?
Sure. Look, I mean, it has always been a very controversial topic, right? Even when I was, sometimes you see people who are a very good fit or let's say have a very great potential, but might not necessarily click in with the case interview. And it really, for me, it's as an interviewer, so I'll reflect as an interviewer, right? It really is a function of maybe 3-4 key dimensions. One is commitment, right? You cannot just crack a case in an interview if you haven't practiced before. So really practicing a lot of cases, it really shows in the first maybe 1 minute if this person has practiced cases or not. So that's first signal is this, let's say interviewee committed to what he is signing up for. Do they really know what they are signing up for? So that's one. And it's very, very subtle, but it really comes across. Second is, of course, the analytical rigor. So being able to, again, structure a very complex problem into a very simple framework. And the ability to go deep, right? So some, in interviews, for example, they're able to structure the first layer of a problem, and this is where they stop. And then you end up in the interview and you look at the sheet and it's still kind of stops at layer one, and then they kind of translate this into more of like a verbal discussion. Those who really kind of do a great job at it is like they're able to go deep on certain verticals based on the interview where they identify some of the framework dimensions are the important ones, and then they can go really deep into the case. So that's also rigor in terms of depth of whether they are able to take the discussion and the analysis too. Third is, of course, communication skills, right? So, when you crack a case in an interview, of course, if it's a regular interview, still communication comes across. And I think in the context of a case, the communication of your ideas and your thinking, so being able to articulate your thought process to the interviewer is something that becomes very important. Finally, quant. So obviously cases typically, depending on when you are in the journey of the interview process, quantitative analysis becomes extremely important as well. So that's also something that is relatively easier to test with a case interview. Maybe one last thing is also synthesis. So there's always the 1 minute elevator pitch, or if you meet X, and you have 1 minute to summarize your case studies, how can you wrap it all up? So also kind of being able to synthesize was a grilling, maybe 40 minutes of what you're trying to crack a case that typically teams crack in 3-4 months. You're trying to crack in 40 minutes, and then you need to kind of obviously very quickly synthesize that to, again, what you perceive as someone who is important in like a senior client or a minister or a CEO or whatever. Puts a bit of pressure as well that you're able to kind of summarize it all together.
Yeah, and I think case interviews probably test for most of the things you would want for someone who would play a consultant role very nicely. But it's not just intrinsics. A lot of practice needs to happen because that's the polish that you can get. From your side, I actually, just reflecting on my side, I was actually an engineer and I interviewed for consulting, and at that point I just did very little practice, and I was not trained on cases, and it was hard. It was really hard to go through the interviews. Luckily, I passed, but it was really, really challenging to go through the interviewing process and to learn how a very different way of thinking and communicating. A lot about communicating, actually. What does that look for you? Do you think engineers should actually study a little bit using cases? Should that be added? Where would it be added? I think that would be very interesting, actually.
Yeah, okay, so...
Said by a former engineer.
My honor. So I want to hammer on the communication part, because let me tell you something. We were talking about how we were a multidisciplinary team, and I reflect on this. One thing we used to do when we were in the mentorship process before we go to the competition, we used to crack a million cases before we travel. So one thing I used to do was to ask Walid and Noor, they were our business students, to sit down in front of me and I'll present my engineering technical side of the case. So if they got what I'm saying, we're good. Khalas, we're fine. They don't have that technical language of every single thing I'm communicating. So if they got it, we're fine. If they didn't, I'm doing something wrong. So I need to go and think again about how can I communicate this, and we were timed. The presentation is timed during the competition. So what we see a lot in, even during our presentations, the students in engineering courses, people are super smart, super smart. They're brilliant, but sometimes they can't pass on the information they want to convey to even the professor. And this goes on later on in our career fields, because a lot of people graduate, highest GPA, but then when they get into the interview, they cannot convey what they want to communicate. So having the pillar of case studies as a part of our education helps a lot with that, because after all, we graduate, we work, we need to be whole-rounded, and academics will not be the only part that's needed. We need to communicate what we've actually learned, and case studies would help an engineering student with this.
Yeah, and I think typically for engineers, you would find very strong in structuring and problem solving and quantitative, but very weak in building the story, building the narrative, communicating that narrative, and also the polish and communication. I think that matters a lot.
Yes, and when you get it, because one other competition, it was actually for the Ministry of Tourism. It was one of the competitions we've won as well. So it had no engineering aspect to it. It was my actually very first competition, and it was on this stage. We presented on this exact stage. So I remember we were splitting up who will present what, and the marketing plan was left. And I was like, I'm going to take it. I had not taken any business minor courses yet. It was my very first thing from a business perspective, and I went up there and I presented the marketing plan, and Dr. Dina Bastuni was in the panel, and she was like, if I had given you the course, you would have done it just the same. And I actually took the course later on. It was the exact same thing. So once you get the grip of it, you can do it with whatever context you face.
That's quite amazing. I'm going to ask more questions to our panel, but I think we have a lot of we've opened a lot of doors for questions. So maybe we should take some questions from the audience. So if anybody wants to ask a question, but let's make it 30 seconds to 1 minute, and it ends with a question mark. So just raise your hands. Angie will bring a mic, or I'll bring a mic. Yes. Okay, so who wants to make a question, or maybe even a short comment? Yes, please.
And I have a question from the point of view of employers and academics, both of them. Now, I want you to tell us like very small tips and tricks on the things that as employers you're seeking to see from the students that we are teaching, that they will learn from the case study kind of teaching way. And from the academic point of view, since you've been using case studies in your classes, to tell me, Bordo, what can we do to let our students be capable of learning using case studies and the skills that they have to have while being taught as in the way of case studies from the point of view of employers?
Fantastic. Thank you, Jailan. We'll take 2 other questions, and then we'll get back to our panel. Please.
Thank you. My name is Dalia Al-Asami. I'm assistant professor in the Egyptian Chinese University. My question is to you, Aya. You're heading the supply chain P&G. I wanted to know if you're encouraged by the company rules and procedures to apply for questions for a case study. because I believe this represents a challenge. If you're doing a case study over a corporate company that has something that needs to be tackled or a challenge that they need to address. So is this by law or by code of conduct, you're encouraged to help people and give them honest information about the company and help them into the course of the case study.
Thank you so much. Third question.
Thank you very much for this insightful panel. My question specifically to Bassem. I'm assistant professor of finance at the British University, and I've been teaching risk management for quite some time now. Hedging is one of the very difficult topics to explain to students, and hence I usually use simulations, guest speakers, things like that to bring the topic into action so that they can understand. My question specifically is, how often have you seen hedging case studies, and if they are relevant to the MENA region or Egypt specifically? Because also after the devaluation of the flotation, everything, we've seen that so many companies, they tried to hedge, but unfortunately most of the hedging was unsuccessful in the currency. Have you seen something like that recently, or it's not in place yet? Thank you.
Fantastic. So I think we've got an open, long list. So Hussein, any thoughts on any of those questions? Whichever you want. If you want to pass, just pass.
For the first question, usually when we discuss our case with the students, what we're looking for is usually, or what I'm looking for is usually fresh perspectives. Like every day today, we have discussions around our business with our partners and our investors and so on. So I'm always curious to see if there are fresh perspectives of people who are not influenced by the same ideas we're influenced by every day. I'm looking for, if they are undergrad students, I'm looking for if there is a generational difference on how they look at the problem and how they see the future. And if there is an attempt, if I'm part of how this should affect their grading or something, it's usually not about the answer. It's about what kind of emphasis do they put on what kind of information. Are they allocating the right time to research the right topics, or how are they prioritizing the different components, different questions that are thrown at them? So it's more about the journey, not the destination. So more about the discussion, more about the reflections, and seeing different flavors of the same answer. So this is how we usually take those discussions.
You work in the space of innovation, and you recruit a lot, and you probably look for people who have this DNA of innovation. Do you think that people who have received some case experience in education or in other contexts, that helps bring that aspect, helps them become more ready for a job like the one that you would have, or a career in that space?
For sure, yeah. I think a key driver to innovation is also exposure to different problems, different markets, different approaches, and then if you run those different ideas through some sort of framework, some sort of reflections, and then this is when you can start also applying parallels. Like cases doesn't have to be about technology companies to be relevant to a technology company. We actually learn a lot when we read about different industries, because different business models can be imported into different industries, and different strategies can also be borrowed. So yeah, I think cases are for sure, they open minds a lot and open discussions around what are the possibilities of what's unusual.
This is interesting. First time that I hear that actually experience produces a lot of innovation, because a lot of people would say it's the other way around. I want someone who doesn't have the experience and the biases. So you're actually saying experience and exposure with a lot of breadth across different industries allows you to see models, and that helps you in actually innovating, bringing new ideas to a different space.
Yeah, exactly. And this brings me to a point, maybe it's not quite related to the questions, but this is a point I want everyone to think about, is the point of, given this exposure and this experience, how can AI help with the learning from case studies? Like, we have a wealth of information, a wealth of data, how can AI help us reason with this data better, with the case studies? How can we do reflections? Like a company like us, for example, if we go to the KCC and get access to all case studies, how can we use AI to answer specific questions when it comes to our strategy? How others have done this differently. So this is a little bit different than just research, just getting the answers, but it's more about reasoning around the case studies. So I think this is also something for everyone to think about.
Yeah, I was wondering how long would it take us until we get to the AI topic in the middle
Yeah,
of this
it's here.
conversation, which is definitely interesting. I know we're covering it in the morning. And I hope that we preserve the learning part out of the case rather than you bring a bunch of documents, put them in ChatGPT and say, create the case, and then the students would put the case in there and say, please solve the case. And we just happen to be watching the AI learning about us rather than us learning about us. I think this is very interesting. Ahmed, you work a lot, again, on the case learning part. So I think back to the question about learning and the tips for the students and the case learning, if you can give us your perspective, and especially at different levels. So the MBA, the undergrad is different from the MBA, from the DBA, from the executive education, and you've navigated all of them. So what's your thought on that?
So in general, I think the issue here is that we assume that there is one size fits all. So at the beginning of my career when I started, I would basically look at the syllabus. I would like to focus on one certain concept, so I'll choose the case based on this. And I would totally forget about the audience. And at the end, so especially when it comes to the DBA, for instance, you've got executives who spend at least 10 years of executive experience. And some of them you would be having, like, for instance, like a case study on Microsoft, and you have someone who works at Microsoft, probably at GM or like in the executive board of Microsoft. That would be totally not very much interesting to him. It's not to discourage people not to use those type of cases, of course, but at the same time, now I do more study in terms of looking at the dynamics of my classroom. I look at where do they come from. I look at the background they have got. So it's more like we need to provide tailored case studies to those different people. And at the same time, for instance, when I think about entrepreneurship, which is my specialty here, so you would have failed entrepreneurs as well. So, and most of the time you would be having like case studies that are focused on success, that has established like breakthrough innovations and so on. But at the end, they are here in the class to know exactly what did they fail at. And that's something that we always forget about. So we're just focusing about delivering the concept, but people are different. And what would make someone fail, for instance, in Egypt is very different from what would make another person fail in the US or in the UK or in France or in any other place in the world. So yeah, so when it comes to the students, I start thinking at the beginning, I look at where do they come from, the companies they work for. I always send them an email before the starting of the class. What are they expecting to see in the classroom? Because at the end, I always start my lectures by saying, okay, so you're here. If you think that I know better than you in the business you're working for, then this is definitely not the right place. So, because when you think, for instance, about the family counselor, that person helps you, but he didn't live in the family you live in. So, and then I try to get like those different cases and put them together so that it helps. And I want to reflect on something that Dr. Sharif Kamel mentioned yesterday. So in terms of case studies, we are looking for people writing case studies. We're looking also for people who know how to teach case studies. And especially when it comes to students and DBAs, for instance, where they have also this research element, we're looking for, so like what Michael was saying yesterday about Michael Porter providing many models, but then they failed to explain many things. So we started looking for case studies, but then those case studies, it's just not one case. We're actually using it to go back to put and feed further data to the initial models that we had. So it's more like a bigger scale rather than focusing only on one single aspect, which is delivering a concept through a case study in a classroom.
That's very insightful, and I want to actually build on what you said about the different levels of education. When I worked with cases for undergraduate students, they're very smart, they have the technical knowledge, but they don't have the work experience. So usually the case is a way to convey the stories of real life to them. So they get about the content, but they have a set of real life stories that will accelerate their getting into the market. So when they get to the market, they can say, this is similar to this company or that company. When you start working with MBAs, typically very smart engineers, 3, 4, 5 years of experience, very solid in their discipline, but it's more about shifting the mindset to I'm becoming an executive. You're moving from your technical small domain to I want to get the breadth. So you're trying to push on the breadth part, and you want cases that would get them beyond their comfort zone. You get into executive MBAs, DBAs, typically seasoned professionals, 20, 30 years of experience. It's more of, if you are the CEO really in that situation, what would you do? And you start getting into very, very, very detailed business decisions that are C-suite level. So completely different discussions. And I've used the same cases in different levels, and the kinds of conversations you have around exactly the same context, people, company, and case is completely different. And that's exactly, I agree with Ahmed. You need to kind of gauge it, calibrate to the context that you're teaching, and to understand what is my objective of using this case. A lot of people think about the mechanics. I'll go through it. Mechanics are nice, but it's more of what's the impact you want to have at the end. Undergrads, I want to give them narrative stories, real life stories, and it's more about learning. You start going up, it's more about C-level problem solving in a very different context. And I love using the cases with executive MBAs. They're really, really fun. There was a specific question to you about P&G as a company, and maybe generalize a little bit about large corporates. Why do companies, and I'll ask Hussein the same question, why do companies like or not like to have case studies written about them? Have you seen that in P&G, for example?
We love it. Yeah. So first off, our interviewing process is not case-based. Our interviewing process is 3 interviews with situational questions and an IQ test at the beginning. However, given that I have graduated with a lot of passion to case competitions, we have a team in P&G called the Campus Team, which is the one that represents the company on for different campuses. So we have different events, like Winter Internship Summit. She can do it for women empowerment, a lot of different events. And whenever I'm leading one, they always ask the question, how are we gonna probe the calibers in this event? And my answer is always, let's give them a case. And we have plenty of cases for P&G, because P&G, after all, is a global company. So we have global cases, we have cases that is related to issues happening right now, which Karim has given perspective on yesterday. And why do we love it? Because, as Bassem was just mentioning, it gives you an insight on the full skill set of this person, hands-on. You just don't ask them the question about a specific situation and then they get back to you about how they've handled it, but they handle the situation right in front of you and they come and present it. So one of the competitions we were managing last year, and it was the inaugural case, and then it's continuous this year and the one after, is the Peakathon. Peakathon, the students, I was managing last year, the students come, they crack a case, they present it, and then it's a filtration and qualifier process until they go and present it in Singapore. And for us, if a caliber goes up there to Singapore and then they come back and they're hired in our office, the international exposure itself, which is something I have benefited from, is huge. So this whole process, whether it's done by universities for students to prep them or by companies to have the proper caliber getting in the company, is amazing. It gives a holistic image and it gives them right international exposure as well. And international exposure is extremely eye-opening. What the person who has come from Canada is a totally different one than the one who has been there, because after all, I was introduced to where the world is actually operating. We were cracking cases with the concept of AI 6 years ago, before AI was such a hot topic. And we ourselves did not understand very much about it, but we need to read a lot of papers about AI and machine learning and all this and that to be able to keep up with the world out there. So Egyptian students and Egyptian calibers will benefit a lot from such a thing.
That's fantastic. And Have you seen cases written about P&G?
Yes. And I've cracked one just for fun before I graduate, but I didn't join the competition.
That's fantastic. And I think a lot of companies like, as Hussein was saying earlier, having cases written about them, it's not about highlighting negative parts, but it's highlighting challenges, opportunities, and it's always put in a politically correct language, so it's not something that is problematic, but it's raising awareness about the company, what it does, and it's usually a very nice recruitment tool and PR tool for companies. Hussein, if you want to reflect on that, and then I'm going to get to Bassem, and then we'll take another round of questions.
Yeah, I think also with maturity, whether as a leader or as an organization, you understand that vulnerability brings up lots of opportunities. So having a company write about their business, their success, yet having a challenge or a difficulty in one area is not something that proper companies are afraid of. It's something that they actually like to entertain, and they understand that this is not only a sign of maturity, but also an invitation for collaboration. So I think the benefit for sure outweighs any negative part. And as Dr. Ayman said, it's put in a proper way, and this is not the only thing. So the credibility of who is writing the case is also very important. So to put it properly in a way that doesn't hurt the company, and to distribute it in the right channels. Like, you want your case to reach the right people, not just have it published on Facebook for everyone to consume and everyone reads it in their own perspective. So there is a big part that goes back to the credibility of the partner owning the case with the company.
Perfect. Bassem, there was a very specific question for you about cases used for financial hedging or things like that, but then there's also reflecting on the learning from cases in general.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I take the question on risk management slash hedging, I agree with you. Hedging is not as a specific concept very. There's enough depth in the market where it's a popular product that companies use, and in many cases, if at all successful. Having said that, the way at least we think about it, and I'm working on a case that is at the heart of this, if I may say, is when you think about hedging and how we think about detailing a business model that's by design resilient to FX shocks, right? So if I narrow down on the concept of hedging, I agree with you, not necessarily the case, but if I think about the broader concept of risk management, so how do you design a business model for a company or a new business that is in a way also resilient to these shocks, then the concept becomes even more relevant, right? And the hedging aspect of things is simply a tool, but then you apply it differently in a different context. So that would be my quick take on this. Also, if I reflect on probably maybe I think it was the first question on what do we would like to see, right? And I think and I go back to the point that Hussein mentioned on the use of AI, and I would really challenge the room on one topic. Now, maybe before I challenge the room, I share a reflection. As BCG, we've been really challenged internally to push extensively on the use of AI in our day-to-day jobs, right? Like there's like a amazing push from a global top down. Like, guys, really encourage people to use tools. Think about the different use cases. Really think about this as a multiplier of our brain power, if I may say, to really come out with something that's a bit more creative, comprehensive, holistic, fast, impactful, you name it, right? Ironically, so last week we had a global day for BCG where we kind of had like a whole workshop, and they were sharing with us data, like which offices around the globe are using Gen AI or any of the internal AI tools repeatedly in a manner that's sustainable. So they kind of measure this per week or per day or whatever. So, and I think the highest office globally had a 49% adoption. Cairo office was 48%. And it was the highest in the MEA. And that made me, I feel proud about this, but also got me to think about, okay, now we think about the case interview process and how do we really, as a firm, signal to the market that this is what we're looking for, right? Because I go back, you were purely talking about case studies now. I would challenge the room. How can we use these tools to make better use or think about these cases differently? We start to bring in analogies from other markets, things that today we cannot do if you're just simply doing it ourselves, right? And I remember maybe last year, so one interview and one interviewee came in. It was like an online interview over Zoom, and he got the case brief right from the interviewer. It wasn't me, but one of the team members. He gave the case brief, and then the interviewee he opened up the laptop and started to solve it on ChatGPT. And then the interviewer was like, "Are you using ChatGPT?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm using it." And then it was the interviewer got it's kind of like a question mark. I mean, what do I do now? Do I consider this as an unfair competitive advantage, or the guy was smart enough to think about it, right? 1 year back, it could have been controversial. Now, I'm even thinking that, people would know coming into the interview process that they would be taking a case and they need to solve it with ChatGPT in the interview. And let's see how that works, right? So I would really push the boundaries of what we think about when we think about case interviews. And the world is changing, right? So we need to really be very adaptive with it, and it will be something that is really, I leave it as food for thought, right? Like I don't have the immediate answer, but at least myself, I'll be exploring to think about how I integrate this into actually the interviewing process as well.
This is not a panel on AI, but I think we're going to go in that direction because I cannot resist. But let me ask you 2 questions. I've seen the outcomes of people asking Gen AI questions for consulting problems and the structure that it provides and the depth and all of that. 2 questions. One, when you get that level of support, do we get sloppy about what we're proposing? Because I see a lot of people taking it for face value and basically just polishing and communicating without really scrutinizing, making sure we go through the thought process. And that's my fear. And if it's used in the interview, I think it's going to, I completely actually disagree with that. But so that's the first question. The second question is, if a lot of what you're doing is generated using those tools, how do clients perceive the value that's coming for what they're paying, and how fast and how much is the bar going up for what they're demanding from you within a typical scope?
Sure. So
that's a 1 hour.
No, absolutely, right? But I'll mention very few examples. Sometimes clients push us to use ChatGPT to help with some. So we've developed a very complex financial model for one of the cases. It's an Excel file, 50 sheets. There's no way under the sun, right? You go into this model and try to comprehend it or change some assumptions. The client basically said, "Can you develop a ChatGPT where I can ask the tool, some questions, and it gives me?" Because right now, what they need to do is they send us the question. We're gonna get back to you. We need to kind of, remodel the whole scenario again. Right now, with AI tools, maybe there's like a much better way to solve it. So that's kind of the client aspect of things. Now, on the first question, which was around sloppiness and so on, I think it's really about educating ourselves on how we use them. It's really about how we use the tools, not for what purpose. So, there's like a whole narrative of what is the appropriate way to use, such tools is kind of to prompt for and inquires, prepare for what questions. So, for example, we put in a deliverable. I'm meant to present this to the CEO. I put this into ChatGPT and I ask it to please ask questions that I might expect to face in the pitch or in a final deliverable, and it kind of helps you prepare in a very different way. So I think it's kind of raising the level of sophistication. Maybe yes, at first glance, people will be kind of, the quick fixes, the quick answers and so on, but when everyone is doing the same, you raise the bar higher. So I think it's also a matter of how sophisticated we become and how we use these tools.
Yeah, and let me bring this conversation back to the topic of our panel and to case education. I've started using Gen AI day 1 after it was released, and probably I was the first person on campus to add in the syllabus on literally the semester after it, fall 22. Actually a policy about using it and encouraging students to use it and all of that. And I'm really worried about how much are they comprehending out of the content that they have. And one of the best solutions is actually using cases or using different tools that have a verbal communication. So if you ask them something at home, they go write it, they go ask the question, present you with a document that they have not thought about it. But when they have to present verbally in a debate, in a format, in a case discussion, it's completely different because they have to internalize the ideas and the content. And this is what I'm focusing about, is how do you get actually tools, and cases are fantastic for that, that help students internalize the content, because otherwise it's AI that is learning and internalizing the content, not the students. And you will end up with people who are basically parroting content. And very, very quickly, within 3-4 years, you're going to start getting graduates who are not able to produce substance on their own. And I think that's the biggest risk that we have. We're producing people who are not producing that substance. So as we get closer to our finish, let me just get 1 minute closing remark from each of our panelists on any of the discussions that we have, maybe a comment, a tip, or a thought. So let me start with Ahmed.
Yes, so I can reflect at the latest topic in general, because it was a big issue actually when we had ChatGPT and Gemini and all those open AI softwares, and people were just split. Should we allow students to use it? Shouldn't we allow it? But now reflecting on this, I think it depends a lot on the topic. So, and it depends a lot on the program as well. So for instance, I teach econometrics, and ChatGPT and those open AI stuff, they saved me, because now I have another assistant in the classroom rather than basically spending some time asking them to do some propositions or to engage in the literature. This is a module that they don't need to read much about the literature. What I care about in this module is that at the end they are able to use data in order to forecast, to speculate, and those stuff are the most relevant for me. So I would just ask them, use ChatGPT, and at the end use those data that it would come up with, and then do your forecasting. ChatGPT wouldn't do it for them. So in this regard, it was like a perfect personal assistant that I wouldn't ask the school to provide another assistant for me, and it would save a lot of time.
That's a lot of efficiency.
Yeah, no, it's in that part it was like really good.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, oh, sorry. Yeah, but for some other courses, of course, sometimes I need to make sure that the students are actually aware of the concepts. They have engaged, they have read things themselves. It's not just like a sloppy answer from ChatGPT or so. And this is when I try to put many restrictions on the usage of the AI tools in general.
Very interesting. Hassim, reflection.
Yeah, so being in technology, I just want to close on technology, not AI only, but around building interactive experiences around the cases. Like there is a case and there are people that have interacted with this case. How can I use technology to jump on a call with the CEO of this company or the guy behind this case? How can I connect with people who have analyzed this case and have interesting solutions for it? And how can those become potential collaborators, consultants, and so on? So there's a lot that can be done around the cases that I would love to see coming to life through the use of technology, incorporating ideas from social media, AI, interaction, whatever, so that it has a further and bigger depth into the industry beyond the discussions in the classroom. So industry can also benefit back, not only academia can benefit from the case studies, industry can benefit a lot from those interactions.
Fantastic. Aya?
So since we're on the topic and we're looking at it from the consultancy and the academic perspective, I represent the FMCGs. And actually, it is as well extremely enabled at this point. Like in PNG, we have our own chat PG form that we use for more even security. However, in the supply chain specifically, we manage plenty of data. We manage plenty of data, and the data analytics is one of the most needed skill sets in our field right now. So students who graduate knowing how to utilize the current tools to get the best data analytics skill set they can provide us with are the stars. And it does not mean that it would eliminate our jobs, because after all, I'll be the one able to manage what would happen when the plant shutdowns, and the plant shutdowns a lot, especially in countries like Pakistan and South Africa, which I've managed. We face this frequently, so I need to crisis manage. I don't have time at this point to write it the right way and send it to ChatGPT and let it get back to me. I have to manage it on the spot, and I have to know what is the right communication skill to use with people from very different cultures in different countries while I'm doing it in a hybrid method. But combining it both, being able to manage the situation right now quickly, having the right communication skills, which we've discussed right now, how to build them, and at the same time using the right tools to be able to manage the huge amount of data that we are using right now, I think this is the best equation we can deal with until we see what's happening in the next couple of years.
Fantastic, thank you, Aya. Best.
Sure. So again, consulting at the heart of it is case preparation. So definitely would encourage a lot of the case method. Maybe one last data point to share with you. Typically, if someone goes to do an MBA, they go roughly through 500 cases, and these are the people we meet for interviews, right? So the sky is the limit in terms of how much we really can push the boundaries on this, and I'm really glad that really this has taken a lot of shape since I graduated, and hopefully to see more of this in the near future.
Thank you so much. Just to bring the whole panel into context, we talked about 4 things. First, the context, and I think there was a lot of discussion about how the cases are used in different contexts, whether in consulting and professional, for an innovative company, as well as in academia, because we always think about the classroom, but I think there's value beyond the classroom. We talked about the career impact, and I think it's very important to bring the case education, even in undergraduate, even in engineering or in other businesses. I think it's a very valuable tool that complements other types of education. We talked about the personal experiences and impact. I think I talked for too long, so it ran out of battery. We talked about personal experience and impact and how that case experience actually affected people's careers, and it affects students' careers. And I think this is an encouragement for us. And then at the end, the AI part, and I think this is the open question for everybody. We all have our opinions and perspectives, but there's a lot to see. And just keep in mind, we're in version 4. Version 5 is coming. Version 6 is going to come in a couple of years. And I think the IQ of all of those engines is increasing exponentially. I have no clue what it's going to look like, but I think it's going to be a lot smarter than us in a couple of years. So we have to start thinking about how do we use an assistant who is probably 20, 30 points, IQ points smarter than us, very quickly. That's going to be a much bigger challenge than what we have right now. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Hussein. Thank you, Bassem. Thank you, Aya and Ahmed, for a very fantastic panel. And thank you, everybody.
Lunch is served in the garden, and we want to thank the panelists and the extremely amazing and discussion. So this brings things into context. Thank you so much. And please, we're all in the garden.